Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio. Hey, good afternoon. It's the 20th of... God, it feels like February. It's November, but last night I was up really late. Couldn't sleep because the wind was howling. And apparently the wind chill factor brought the temperature down to -5 degrees, which I think is incredible because that's really cold. That's like brutally cold stuff. In those kinds of conditions.
Yeah, especially for November.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, in those kinds of conditions, there's like a limited window of exposure where you're not damaging your lungs and inducing like pneumonia. It's really dangerous. Even if you're wearing like a jacket and a hat and gloves and, you know, proper equipment, the air is so cold and your lungs are so warm that moisture will condense in your lungs and it will impede the functionality of the alveoli, the things that transfer the oxygen into the bloodstream. They stop functioning. This shit's so dangerous. And yet, even all through the night, you know, saw people driving by like they've been out about doing their thing because, you know, it's Saturday night.
I can imagine needing to go out in this weather. Like...
Seriously.
Oh, I really need to go to the bar that bad.
I've been thinking about this. It's like, what kind of like social addiction would one have to be willing to subject their bodies to that kind of environmental condition? Like, these are the kind of conditions that if NASA were sending people to another planet, even if there was a breathable atmosphere, they'd be wearing fucking bulb-headed environmental suits. And then they'd still only be out of their habitation module for like 20 minutes at a time.
That says a lot, you know. Again, it's like the way you frame it, it is a social addiction when people go out into this stuff just to, quote unquote, have fun in a social setting.
Risking hypothermia and pneumonia.
Yeah, it's
I mean, like being outside for 5 minutes last night to let Bruce go drop the deuce. That was punishing. It was like oppressive cold. He doesn't even wear boots. He just goes out there and then drops it. You know, that's like... I feel bad for animals that are stuck outside, like in this kind of weather. I know it's only going to get worse because, as you said, it's only November.
Well, but then I see the squirrels surviving.
Yeah.
Like they survived overnight. There's a bunch that just came by today, so it's like, you know, the animals have this shit figured out for the most part.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I see cardinals sitting in trees all through winter, through the harshest winds, and so like if they can survive here, they're tiny.
Yeah, the cardinals and the sparrows and the mourning doves. There's a few that stay. I think some of the crows stay. They don't all leave.
Yeah, fucking warm-blooded dinosaurs.
Pretty much, right?
Warm-blooded flying dinosaurs. But seriously, like, what is it? I mean, obviously I don't understand because I didn't feel compelled to go out. I don't ever feel compelled to go out though, especially when it's cold. Like when there's just even like the smallest chance of inclement weather, my red lights and warning signals go off. It's like, there's no reason to go out in this. But for whatever reason,
it must be some sort of addiction, really.
It's got to be.
Again, I don't even want to go start my car just to keep the battery charged. Like, let alone go out to do something. Which, yeah, then because I'm not leaving the house,
Hey, what are you gonna go do? Drive her in a circle for half an hour?
Right, but then I do have to go start it just every couple of days, just because I'm not like actually going anywhere. Like last winter, the battery died and I had to go get it replaced just because I didn't use the car enough.
Man, so that's like that's actually really interesting because I've not read anything about that, let alone like realize that I know somebody who's experienced this. Everyone that I know who has had an a hybrid vehicle, they operate it like, frequently until it's, either, I know one person, I think there's got.
Well, that's not the one I was talking about.
Oh, you're talking about the Jag.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I know exactly what that's like, having a second vehicle that you don't like drive regularly, and the first time you need it in months, it doesn't fucking do a thing. It's just looking at you like, what do you want?
Yeah, and then I realized like I haven't driven over 3,000 miles in the last like 4 years in that car. It's still under 100,000 miles, which is where like last year just sat there for winter.
Man, I remember at one point you were talking about going on like a long drive, like a multi-day scenic tour of like the Southwest or something like that, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then I don't think you ever mentioned that again. But I'm pretty sure you were talking about driving the Jag like across the country and back, which I thought was like very cool.
That window is definitely gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really hardly left the state since COVID. Barely left the city, let alone the state. It's not worth it. Literally nothing worth it.
Well,
because then people will like travel and go somewhere and potentially get COVID while they're there. And then it's like they may have contracted it before they were on their way or whatever, but it's like then you're just having a horrible time somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it's better to go. If you're going to get COVID, you might as well get it when you go there, so you're miserable when you get home, right? If you're, because at least that way you've got all the shit that you need. If you develop all of the symptoms when you're away from your home base, oh crap, that's like the least ideal variation of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
No resources or highly limited resources. Paying a premium for everything
more expensive. Yeah. That's just one of the worst parts about traveling is like generally the hotels don't have any sort of food prep or storage, so you can't really like buy food to prepare it, and then you just have to eat out every meal, and then that ends up being like or $30 at the least to start,
or the hotel
up to like 70.
But sometimes the hotels have the refrigerators with all the stuff in it that charge you just to open the door.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do want to store something overnight, you've got to pay twice to get it in and out of the fridge.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's like $12 just to open the fucking door. And if you move something and the RFID scanner inside decides that you like took a bottle out, even though you just moved it 6 inches, you end up paying for that too. That stuff's nuts.
Yeah, Vegas has a lot of those where it's like they have this shit on sensors and it's like not even in the fucking fridge. Like if you pull a bag of chips or some shit, it like records it.
Yeah, like that tray that has the coffee maker and the plastic
Yeah.
coffee cups. Don't even move that thing, because if you move it, you just paid for that entire plate of coffee stuff. This is the future of whatchamacalliting, nickel and diming.
Yeah, because then it's like one of those tiny bags of potato chips will be like $5. And it's like
All you do is
7
move it.
chips.
You might not even. You might have, like, bumped it off the edge of the thing, and it fell behind fell behind a chair. You still paid for it. And it won't be like itemized. It won't be like, oh yeah, here's your chips. It'll be like room amenities, and it'll just be a number.
But then when you're traveling, you're so nutrient deprived, those types of things start sounding like good decisions.
Yeah, I will admit that if I'm driving for a long distance, there's something about a stick of jerky and some chips and a Gatorade that just solidifies in my gut. And it turns to stone, and it prevents me from having to utilize rest areas as frequently. And I'm not gonna lie, it sucks later, but during the drive, it's not terrible. It's definitely terrible like 20 hours later. But those are the kind of things that seem like good decisions when you're nutrient deprived.
Yeah, actually, taking jerky on a plane has been one of the best hacks I've ever done in the sense of like, not the sticks, but the bags.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the sticks, but I think the shredded jerky, not like tiny pieces, but that are like, you know, slightly bigger than bite size.
Oh yeah,
That's my
yeah.
favorite type to actually take on a plane because then it gives you enough nutrients where you're not like tempted by the stupid like $15 sandwich.
Oh yeah, and with the old lettuce and the old onion.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing that looks
But
like a
then
tomato, but it's really a
the
cracker.
fucked up thing is you go to like the airport in Paris, they have like fresh baguette sandwiches with some ham and some butter and some brie, and it's not even ridiculously priced. And then it's like, okay, they can do it. They can do it some places. So why can't they do this everywhere? And then
Well, you've seen the images of school lunches from other countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in Japan and France and Germany, England, other countries throughout like the European Union, they mandate they like have regulations and requirements for school lunches. And
Well, if you don't go home, because when I did a couple exchange programs, and the kids I stayed with would go home for lunch, just
that's
straight
even
up.
cooler.
Yeah, and their parents would be home for lunch. Like their dad worked at a bank, and he would come home, and everybody would have lunch as a family, which
What a
is like you can't do
foreign
that everywhere.
concept.
You can't do that everywhere,
Yeah.
but they would give everybody long enough breaks where, yeah, if the town is small enough, you can go fucking home and then come back. So shit like that where it's just so foreign to Americans, where you're like, oh, we claim to be about family, but
No, it's really
we
about
don't actually do shit like a family.
I think the reality is that it's about industrial efficiency. And education in this country is an industry, right down to the earliest stages. Ingrained schedules, ingrained are the breaks, the holidays, days off. These are all built into an economic engine. Like right, and even with the healthcare system. So it starts from the absolute moment of, hey, I'm here and I'm a person. Like that individual that's just recently born is just thrust right into that same economic scheduling, industrial scheduling. It's so sad. It's so sad. Why?
Well, I think a lot of people just don't know any other way for various reasons. And it's like enough of boomers never saw anything else and never left the country, and think that their way is is the only superior way possible. Down to like the notion of food delivery being a relatively new invention concerning like meal prep. Like they would bring fucking ice and milk and salt, and there's things that they would like deliver to the home. But the notion of then calling someone to bring your completely prepared meal to your actual abode, that's a relatively new invention. And one generation is like
Well, for the
very heavily
masses.
dependent upon it. Right. Yeah. I mean,
There've always
but
been
again,
people who got food delivered all the
that's
time.
the difference between like a period where the masses can have access to some shit that only nobles had access to before.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like this is a relatively new thing on that scale. And a lot of people have their daily existence dependent upon that being accessible for various reasons. And it's like seeing them need so much of their daily nourishment prepared by somebody else for them to feel like they have the time to do what they need to do to just exist. It's like they have no high ground concerning calling any generations lazy. Like you guys they invented fucking mass scale food service. That's them. That's not us. That's them. Because they were so disconnected from their home lives that they couldn't get daily sustenance, like time enough to prepare it. That's a huge failure on society's part that they're not actually taking into account the levels, because then it's like you look at the foods that people consume and they're so processed because the perception that there's not enough time to eat freshly prepared food usurps the notion that freshly prepared food is better than rushed food. It's like there's so much about the focus on the economic machine that puts the economic machine above the individual that people are willing to sacrifice their daily consumption cycle to the machine for the sake of the machine, which is not sustainable. And that's the paradox of like, if you as the machine, not you, but if the machine feeds people as if they're chattel and overstuffs them with this corn, fucking overly processed meal that's just intended to keep the nourishment enough for them to go through the grinder, that's only sustainable as long as there's no need to have anything beyond chattel. And we're getting to a point where we need beyond chattel to continue to be able to battle the elements, and that in the sense of you don't really need more than chattel if there's no external threat. And that's kind of like we've gotten to a point as a species where the external threats of nature have been mostly uh, handled to the extent that the perception is there that we have heating, we have cooling, we have shelter, we have storage, we have uh, energy. So there's a lot of things that we have that give the perception of being able to resist winter, being able to resist the heat of summer, being able to resist like the crops not having the same yield for a year or two. There are natural pressures that society has made itself comfortable seeming like it's conquered, and in the process created a whole different set of internal pressures like war at mass scale, or uh, capital restrictions or capital controls at large scale, as if there's no more external pressure from the environment. So I think that's why it's so difficult for specifically boomers to accept that the environment became a threat again, because their entire lives were basically growing up in a system in which the hurricanes weren't that bad, the summers weren't that hot, the winters weren't that cold. So all of their infrastructure were able to protect them from the natural pressures. So they thought, now we can focus on nukes. Now we can focus on space warfare. But then the environment became a threat again. Now the floods will kill hundreds of thousands of people if we don't pay attention to them. The heat will kill old people. The cold will kill old and young people. The sickness will kill people if we don't pay attention. And those things are hard for boomers to deal with because they're post polio, but pre COVID. And they had this, like, the greatest generation, quote unquote, had so much protection from everything that they didn't realize they had, that now when they try to make it seem like they had all these struggles that we actually have, it's like it's really comical for those people to think they had hardships. And that's where I'm like, they had like no hardships. When you really look at it, the only hardships that the old people had was like the racism that they created and dealing with the racism that they created. And as far as like the actual climate change that a lot of them denied, they didn't have to deal with that shit. So I can understand why it's hard for them to fathom the existential crises that we are constantly facing, because to them it didn't happen until almost the end of their lives.
They also didn't have to contend with an algorithmic intelligence that was going to remember everything that they ever did, like in near perfect detail.
And to the very opposite of that, they can just like move and basically erase their connection to their history by changing their name, which is fucking impossible today. But it's like every British person that's not in Britain probably is running from a fucking terrible story. Oh, well, before like the internet. And it's like you see all these British people like that became like grifters elsewhere, but it's because they had fucking exhausted all of their goodwill at home and had to leave the country and basically change their identities. And it's like specifically Britain, because for whatever reason, their accents were used to manipulate people into trust. And that's kind of where, like, if you look at like the idea that it's the Nigerian prince scam and not the British expat scam is like fucking hilarious in the reality of like, there's so many more white male British scammers than actual Nigerian fucking scam artists in the world. And at way larger scale. is not even remotely comparable. Considering Britain fucked up Nigeria, like it's another form of British displacement of blame that Nigerians get called scam artists and not fucking British men.
I think that probably just wrecked a bunch of people's perspective on the globe. I want to give them some time to collect their, what's left of their thoughts.
Well, that's like, think about the biggest scams of like the last 20 years. How many of them have come out of Nigeria? How many have come out of fucking Wall Street and Silicon Valley? I mean, fuck. The LIBOR scandal in Britain has been way bigger than anything that's come out of Nigeria concerning Nigerians trying to exploit non-Nigerians, because Nigerian government will exploit Nigerians, but they don't have the external reach and the scale to exploit on the same level as the Enrons and the fucking Bernie Madoffs. So it's like I've still seen people use Nigerian print scam, which is like, even there's Nigerian royalty, but there's also like Nigerian parliament. So it's like really weird to see the way that American and Western racism manifests itself in projecting their own ills on other people. Because then that's the same shit with like the Chinese humanitarian stuff, where it's like, wait a minute, though, the same practices are happening here and worse. So how are they in a humanitarian crisis but America's not? That doesn't math. The Uyghurs are an oppressed minority, but black people aren't? That doesn't math.
Well, they care more about the Uyghurs, obviously.
Right, yeah.
Because it's like this nebulous concept that nobody actually understands, because most people in this country don't speak Chinese, so they'll never actually be able to parse or make sense of any of the information coming out of China. Can we really trust like somebody whose entire like journalistic mission has been to find something wrong with China?
Right.
I mean, when the media is so steeped in bias, can we even really call them anything but propaganda? I don't know. It's tough because I don't speak Chinese. I can't read Chinese. I can only read what like Google translates for me, or whatever the translator I'm using translates for me. And a lot of the time, there's always this. I have this suspicion that it's like a thinly veiled piece of state propaganda, because it comes out of China. It's probably some propaganda. It might be true, but I don't know, because I can't actually track the 200 million journalists in China. Like, they probably have as many journalists as we have voting people in this country.
Oh my God. So this is a perfect time to discuss that like bullshit propaganda that just popped up about Iran. So I don't know if
the 15,000 people who were going to be executed. That shit was so crazy. And people ran with it.
They ran with that shit so fast, where I'm like, hold up. First off, this does not sound possible, in the sense of, if you don't know anything about how governments work, or how executions work, or how punishments work, okay, I get it. Maybe this sounds feasible. But if you just take a fucking second to look at the stated facts of what has happened so far, and then what people were claiming, it's just it's beyond absurd. It's not borderline, it's beyond absurd to think that they were about to execute 15,000 people. So It's like
the logistics alone of killing 15,000 that requires, ordnance.
Yeah, and so that alone, it was like, first, let's take a step and realize how absurd the logistics of what they're claiming are. But then if you don't need to go that far, then it's like, let's look at the sources of where everything was coming from. Not one source was anything in Farsi, and further, none of them were any sort of legitimate news sources at that. So all of them were like, it would be some weird like Israel Times online or some shit where you're like, what the fuck is this website trying, pretending to be a news outlet? And then people were just running with it, because then if you look at the vote that they were like, the video of the vote that they were saying was the claimed source of legitimacy. It was like a video of the Iranian parliament, and then there was some like Persian script over top, and it was like a third, maybe like 2-minute clip. So
my understanding is that 15,000 people were arrested for protesting something.
Yes, that's accurate.
And
that's
then
definitely accurate.
And then on that same day, there was an execution, but it was an unrelated execution. Like that person who was executed was completely unrelated. They had committed an actual capital crime or a capital offense, and they were executed for committing a real legitimate crime that had been run through their justice system and all of that stuff. It was unrelated, but I'm pretty sure what happened was someone saw 15,000 arrested and executed, and they just skipped the rest of the information. Maybe it was like a statistical thing that they saw and they said, holy shit, they executed 15,000 people because somebody didn't know how to read a chart. But no, it turns out that state propaganda, non-government actors were perpetrating some crazy translation. Trying to start a war.
Yeah. So it's like suddenly all the Americans who were running with the story are experts in Iranian government and how it operates.
The Iranian judicial system.
Right. And none of them have any remote clue how to speak the language or read the script. But they're fucking positive that 15,000 people are sentenced to execution. And it's like, how do people get so sure of something that if they just took 2 seconds to think about their capacity to confirm these things like firsthand, because they would, like, if somebody had the capacity to read the local language and understand, they could confirm or deny whether these things were happening. That's one thing. But all of the Americans who only speak American English suddenly knowing about what's happening in fucking Iran, don't know anybody in Iran, not one fucking Iranian person, but they know what's happening in Iran.
I wonder how many of those experts can tell the difference between Arabic and Farsi written.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm sure shit cannot.
How many of those people know what Farsi is? You know what I mean? Suddenly, they know everything about fucking Iran, but I guarantee if you ask, like, those people, at least 50% would not know what Farsi is. Like, so I'm like, the reason I was very skeptical of the report in the first place was like, hold on, where is this coming from? Because all I see is English. All I see is English people saying this shit. I don't trust that. I don't trust that shit. Mainly because they've been doing this shit for fucking decades. So if this is happening now, whose interest is in for me to think that this is happening when we just had fucking January 6th? We had one of the protesters here die. So there are protesters. None of the protesters here, well, let me call them insurrectionists. None of the insurrectionists here have been sentenced to death, but one of them has died. So as far as like the comparable atrocity levels, the January 6th thing is still on par with what's happening in fucking Iran right now, technically. So if they're not the same institutions that are hyping about the Iranian protests aren't still hyping about January 6th, something's wrong. Because January 6th is not over. Like all of the fallout from that is not yet over. So to move on to Iranian news as if America has solved its insurrection and has dealt with it all in light of people having died during it, like on both sides, because one it was like a cop died and then one of the insurrectionists died. So there's multiple people who died in the fucking let's call it what it is. They tried to coup America. There was an insurrection in which they tried to coup, and we are not acting like that's some fucking banana republic shit. It's like, they're trying to equate what happened on January 6th with a Black Lives Matter protest, which is an actual protest, not an attempt to take over the fucking government. They tried to take over the government, but they're making it seem like it's a protest. No, they tried to coup America, and we're still like it. It's like that shit didn't even happen. The way Americans have moved on mentally, in the sense of, if this had happened, well, let's use Iran as an example.
If this would happen
We
in
can't stop
Iran,
fucking talking about the revolution in Iran or the potential revolution. We're not even remotely close to that place. But it's like so prevalent in our news cycle that you would think they should still be talking about the January 6th coup.
well, we live in a society of spectators that don't realize that they aren't just in the theater, but the theater itself is the stage. We have front row seats for all of the action because we are on the stage with the performers, because we are also the performers. We just think we're the spectators. We think we're the audience. Everyone thinks they're the audience at some level, because that shit's happening somewhere else. I don't even know what that's like. It's the dissociation that allows us to think that, or allows some people to think that it's just not their problem. Like the environment, the weather's great in some place and always is. So why would they be concerned about, somewhere else? It hasn't changed in their entire lives. But it will eventually. And then they'll complain. Or they'll do something about it. Like Republicans who find out that they have a gay son or daughter. But I really think that it's because so many people think that they're just watching it. Also, I think
that's why that dissociation is so prevalent, because then it makes it easier for people to be made passive in the process. If it's like, the Ukrainian war has been a televised event the whole time. So in people's minds, it's almost like not real. It's like they cheer on sides of a TV show. And it's this dissociation. I think that's...
Oh, man. That's the weirdest part, is the cheering for war at all. Like, obviously we want Russia to stop, and we want Ukraine to be given enough time to rebuild itself and rejoin the global economy as a contributing member, because they produce lots of wheat and steel and other stuff that the global economy relies on. And we want Russia to fix itself and quit being a bunch of criminals, but that's an entire cultural construct that has to be dissected. And I don't know enough about Russia. All I know is that it seems like some really fucking corrupt shit seems to happen there all the time. Like it's the United States has Las Vegas, and the world has Russia, and that's where that shit goes down.
In Monaco.
And Monaco, but Monaco is like rich Russia. And then, like, China has Macau, which is Chinese Las Vegas. I'm pretty sure some really extra shady shit happens in Macau that nobody even knows how to write stories about. Like the shit doesn't even the stories don't even leave Macau type stuff. That's why we stay away from Macau. Although, from what I've seen in images, it's a very beautiful place. Has a pretty crazy skyline. And I can't speak for like street level imagery because I haven't seen any of it that strikes me as different from other cities in China. So, but those skylines, those are pretty impressive. Although I think if I hadn't grown up in America and been accustomed to American cityscapes, I would think that they're impressive too.
Yeah, it's like weird in that the high rise is very romanticized in the West, but when you see like a sprawling horizontal city, that shit looks impressive as hell.
Yeah.
And we don't have as many of those in America. I'm thinking particularly of Istanbul in that the way it works with the landscape looks like a more natural growth, whereas like American cities look like cancerous growths. And like,
hey, where can we build this?
So if you look at like Los Angeles compared to Istanbul, it's way different. They look way different, even though they're roughly laid out the same. And that's where Istanbul is way easier to get around for as big of a city as, I guess it's like a city and a district in a way, in that it's kind of the same with like Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City. The edge of it's not difficult to go from the inside to the outside as big as it is. Whereas LA, it's like, it's fucking impossible to move anywhere, like just transit wise in LA. It's just really difficult to get around. And I think there's like something about the way that the city moves with the landscape in Istanbul versus like it appears as if it does in LA. But the way the traffic flows, clearly something's not jiving right.
You reminded me of Beijing, which is a city comprised of rings. It's essentially a giant fortress, the entire city, and it's huge. I mean, megalopolis huge.
Basically, Istanbul is too, yeah.
Yeah, like old cities. There's something about them. They're not. They don't have like efficiency engineers and traffic engineers back then. They didn't have giant projects where they could utilize sophisticated computer modeling to determine how to build roads in certain areas, or what kinds of roads, or how to expand any of that stuff. They did things very differently. Like, how do we protect this city from invaders? Because, Beijing, like, they had to deal with Mongols for a long time. That's why they built that freaking wall, which is like the outermost edge of the system of rings, which is crazy. Like, the edge of it is called the Citadel, and it's 100% a fortress that you can go walk up and down and around and get your picture taken in costumes that look like traditional Qing and Ming dynasty outerwear. It's a really cool place. I tried to walk up the stairs, but it was like after a while, it's like climbing a ladder. And I looked around and I looked down and I realized I was like 100, 200 feet up above the place where my dad was waving at me. And then I looked up and I realized I was like maybe a quarter of the way up the hill. So I turned around.
Sometimes you got to know when to
yeah,
turn around.
I wasn't going to be able to make it in time to get up there and back to be on the tour bus. It wasn't going to be worth it. I was already worn out. But you can tell that place was like a pilgrimage for some people. Like they were going to get to the top of that thing if that was the only thing they did that day. They'd find a way back to their hotel. I think Belgrade is another one of those really old cities that is like 9 generations of cities or 12 generations of cities, and there are different maps of how it's evolved over the years. But there are a bunch of cities in Europe, actually, I believe, that are all essentially built on top of the skeleton of previous iterations. Like they'd get conquered and then they'd be rebuilt. Or
oh, you reminded me. There was like a huge earthquake. I forget what century, but they had to like rebuild because then when shit like that happens, I do think it like forces the city to like, it's like, oh shit, there's a fault line here. We can't then have this on we can't have this like main street on the fault line.
We have to completely redo infrastructure at this point. Maybe those kind of geological cataclysms are good things. You know, maybe if an edge of California.
1766.
1766, really?
Yeah. Sea of Marmara.
I wonder how that affected like the rest of Europe's economy, and then if that had any impact on the British economy at the time. Because I bet something like that would be, you know, quite devastating to the entirety of trade.
Well, it killed 4,000 people.
Yeah. I mean, but like regionally, I bet that would just destroy trade or disrupt trade completely, which would have broader economic impacts. And like the 1700s the 1700s there was quite a bit of seafaring trade going on. I bet I'm just thinking like, I wonder if there's more to like the timing of the the Tea Party and the increase in taxes and all of these, like what other economic motivators were at play.
Well, that's just like the 1994 earthquake in LA. That was it was so massive. I don't remember. I don't think it necessarily killed a ton of people, but there was just so much destruction.
Yeah, California is one of those places that's really dialed into earthquake preparedness at the elementary school level. So I think anybody that managed to matriculate from their primary education in California, at the very least, has an understanding of what to do in an earthquake situation. Like that stuff's drilled into their heads. I remember it very clearly. That's also like, you know, most of California is a desert. They've got to pump water into it just to make it work. The whole southern third of it, I believe, is like just rolling desert. If the water stopped flowing, Los Angeles would dry up. San Diego would dry up. The Colorado River doesn't even go to the ocean anymore.
So comparably, the big one caused 72 deaths. 9,000 injuries and 25 billion in damage in $94, which is um
I mean, it's got to be something like I don't know what the I don't know what the math is to get to bring a '90s current or dollar value up with inflation at this point, but
I'm doing the math. It would have been 502 billion today.
wait, what?
Oh wait, hold on. They added an extra zero. 250. No, 50 billion.
Okay.
No, there's an inflation calculator.
Okay.
And it added an extra zero.
Yeah, well, you said 500 billion. I was like, holy shit! What the fuck?
It's 101%, 101.1% inflation since 1994 to today. So yeah, it doubled. $50 billion. I feel like that's.
It might as well be 500 billion, though.
Well, I think that's more than we've given to Ukraine.
50 billion. Yeah, wait. Aren't we?
Yeah,
I thought that's like
been
80 something. 100.
No, it's.
Have they breached the 100 billion mark?
54.
Okay.
It's the highest number I've seen on Ukraine.
$54 billion in. Well, what are we approaching? 10 months now? 11 months? 9 months? It started in March. Yeah, 9 months.
That's insane.
Okay.
I wonder, because then you could probably do a breakdown. I mean, you could, but it's a matter of when you have that much money, then it's like, oh, you can say it's this amount of dollars per casualty. So we've spent like X amount of dollars per Russian live taken in the Ukrainian, or I guess Russian live taken or Ukrainian live lost, or whatever, however you want to break it down. But
Well,
it's like
all
this stuff is going to death.
That's just a rationalization for the impact on a foreign economy, a local economy. Oh yeah, we just took out how much?
We're
I mean,
shipping or exporting death.
financing death. Your taxes at work. When did we become freaking Starship Troopers?
Right.
I mean, seriously, that shit was supposed to be like
1776.
the book was supposed to be a cautionary tale, and the movie itself was supposed to be a satire, which ironically got turned into a series of really serious C-list movies. They're real serious about pushing like fascism and those things. But the first one was a damn satire, and the book itself was a cautionary anti-fascist narrative that nobody apparently read thoroughly enough to comprehend. Well, not nobody. A significant number of people didn't read clearly enough or understand clearly enough to recognize. Like that's actually kind of sad.
Well, it's like Beavis and Butthead started off satire, and nobody got it as satire, so it just created a whole bunch of Beavises, or I don't know which one it produced more of, but it definitely produced a bunch of Beavises and a bunch of Buttheads.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing about Beavis is that his character was originally like on a path to good, because then they did the episode where what if Butthead was never born, and Beavis was like fucking volunteering at like he was like a good person that was like volunteering at homeless shelters and shit, not just like not stupid. He was on the complete opposite of the spectrum. So it was very clear that Butthead was meant to be the bad influence. And Beavis was like the
victim.
collateral damage. Yeah. So
Poor Beavis. Even when he tries.
I mean, it's the same shit with the zombies.
Yep.
Zombies were commentary about capitalism, and then capitalism just took them and ate them up, cannibalized the zombies.
So earlier I was thinking about music, and you just reminded me about this about capitalism. But I was also thinking about Star Trek, and I thought, obviously the Federation created disco and house music, and they appreciate, or at least they try to appreciate, all music. And then Vulcans, they're really into techno and down tempo, and they appreciate human classical music. And then like Romulans, they also make techno because they're related to Vulcans, but they also make drum and bass, and they believe their music to be superior. Klingons also make drum and bass, but they also make jungle and dub music, and they secretly like house music, but they can't admit it to their friends. Bajorans,
remember the Klingon punk?
All that too, and Klingon death metal and stuff like that. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But Bajorans, I'm just on an electronic music kick here. Bajorans make dubstep, and they hate dubstep.
Well, there's a whole episode of
I've got a
Voyager
few more
where the Doctor has his kids listening to Klingon punk, and he's upset that his kids like listening to Klingon punk and hanging out with bad
That's
Klingon
hilarious.
and shit. Yeah.
Cardassians make brostep, and they believe their music to be superior. Also, Ferengis, they make commercial and festival EDM because they're only interested in music that turns a profit. And the Orions make underground rave music because they're pirates, and they listen to this shit to annoy everyone. And then there are the Packlets, and they listen to trance because they don't actually make any music of their own. And that was my breakdown of the Star Trek music cosm. But you're right. There's an entire realm of like Klingon punk and metal, and they actually explore that in Lower Decks.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that one too.
That was a good reminder that there is music in Starfleet or in Star Trek, not just like bad jazz
they also
and trombone
make fun
jazz.
They make fun of the music when on one planet Harry Kim's like, "Oh, that's beautiful. What is that?" And she's like, "It's not an instrument. It's a fucking analysis machine." Like, you fucking simp. Get out of here, Harry Kim. Just easily impressed by everything. This ain't a fucking musical instrument.
Like,
get out of here,
bro. That's a calculator.
Yeah, it's like if somebody was like dialing a telephone number. What kind of song is that? What are you talking about? Yeah, so even Voyager was making fun of that shit.
Well, there's an episode of Deep Space Nine where Dukat is going on about Cardassian arts and music and all the refinement and the high culture that they've developed. Meanwhile, everything that we see them do is representative of a just horrible, like the worst version of America. That's why I think the Cardassians make bro step. Actually.
I think, I feel like the series stayed away from actual electronic music.
They were smart to do that
the entire time. Yeah,
it was a really smart decision. They would have either alienated a significant portion of their audience, or they would have completely dated that the stories in like what's that show Dark Matter. It's like Firefly, but they kill people all the time. Okay, that show is great, and it delves into like corporate oligarchy, and it's fantastic. But every time they go to some planet, they're listening to like bro step or really aggressive dubstep, and instantly it's like, oh, we're we're in the 2000s in the future.
Yeah, dubstep was not a good choice for any soundtrack because it totally dates it, and it felt like it was never going to go out of style, like as a punishment while it was happening. Thank God it finally did. It was like I would hate playing dubstep just because it's like not really danceable, it's not really rappable, and you just kind of just have to stand there and nod along to the bass line because the drums are never great in dubstep. There may be like 3 good drum songs in dubstep entirety, which is like I wish I was exaggerating. It's just so the drums are so sparse and the patterns are so whack. I fucking really hated dubstep for being popular, but everybody was loving it at the clubs, so it was like you couldn't not play it. So it was just like a punishment period.
Well, it's like it's a bass music for a generation of people that never experienced real bass music until they got to a club, and then having that brick wall of bass that happens like the entire time except for those, 32 bars during the drop, while everyone anticipates it and gets excited because there isn't any bass and they can actually feel their skin again. But incidentally, the drop it wasn't like beholden to dubstep. It existed long before in house music and in techno and in drum and bass and in breaks and all the hardcore variants and in trance and in even disco had the drop. I think dub music actually invented the drop. But yeah, there was a very short window of early dubstep when it was more like sped up dub music that I really enjoyed because it was sparse and it had atmosphere and you could hear sounds evolve. But once that was, replaced entirely by Transformer sex, it just stopped being interesting to me. There's a few songs that are really interesting to me, but those have so much attention paid to the synthesizers sound themselves, the way those tones are evolving, that they almost border on like, I hate using the term IDM because it's such a specific and also dumb name, but it almost has that kind of quality of attention paid to the bass instead of the drums. And that stuff's really cool, but that wasn't like the common version of dubstep sounds. It's like they made something else with the same tonal palette, and it just kind of got lumped in because that's what the core culture decided at the time. Which is another reason I think genres are like stupid and they only exist for classification purposes, because some artist might not even be aware of a genre and they just might be making something, and next thing you know they're being lumped in with a bunch of people who might use the same sounds or synthesizers in a very similar way, but it's not the same kind of music. And I'm really thinking about a lot of like industry, not industrial, but industry, like electronic pop, electro pop, or a lot of the EDM stuff that sounds very cookie cutter, where it's like someone took a song template and just changed the preset on the synthesizers, or changed a few of the samples, or where the sample playback begins. Like some of that stuff is pretty weird to me, because I feel like I've heard the same song over and over and over again. And I'm not talking about, there's actually a chord progression. There's some comics who made fun of this chord progression. It's like the 1-5 minor 6 4 chord progression, and it's very common. It's like if you know this chord progression, you can play something like 300 or 400 different songs spanning from, or pop music and rock and roll songs spanning from like 1950 all the way through now, and it's crazy because the further we get from the introduction of this very simple chord phrase, the less complex the music that utilizes it becomes. And so in a sense, we're approaching a time with like pop music where a lot of it does sound the same because it is the same. And it's almost all essentially tapping into like a sense of nostalgia. But it lacks like the broader compositional complexity of earlier generations of music. And it's been replaced with complex sounds or essentially a complex arrangement of the same things with different words that are just as, pop music has really hollow lyrics. And I've never really been able to get past that. I like it because the music is fun and they use really cool sounds, but it's like if you make music using synthesizers, but you don't use electronic music production methodology and use traditional like piano-based and piano composition methodology.
Have you heard Axis of Awesome's 4-chord song?
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that performance of theirs where they do like the chorus for like every song that uses that 4-chord progression is absolutely brilliant, and I'm surprised that they haven't gotten hit with some kind of like cease and desist from every copyright holder.
Well, and it's like, how could they when those copyright holders should technically get suits from each other?
Yeah,
like it's like the Spider-Man meme, all pointing.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. Like those guys, they put it all together, and they made one of the most impressive comedic satire music performances I think that I've ever seen. Like it's on par with some of Weird Al's stuff in terms of holy shit, did they just wreck my brain kind level of amusing and entertaining and imagination stirring, really good stuff. Also, to learn all of the choruses and then figure out how to put them all together in such a way that's not impossible to remember the lyrics to. That's actually more impressive.
I started realizing early on as a DJ that some of my favorite artists were using the same like sample packs or sound like sound setups to be the basis for their like digital audio workstation like mods. So it's like specific labels would have their setup and one artist would come in and do their shit and then another artist would come in, like Hospital Records or damn, I can't think of the one with Pendulum, whatever label they were on. But anyway, it's like once you realize the sample packs or the mods were the same, then you could mix the tracks so it sounded like somebody would be playing a synth between songs because it was the actual same synth.
Yeah, and they were using presets.
Yeah, and but it would be like the same preset on two different songs. So if you could find them and mix it, it creates this experience where it sounds like to the audience they don't know where the old song starts and the new song begins because it's using the same synth between tracks.
That's actually one of those things I noticed during the peak of like dubstep production on like on the forums. People would have full blown conversations about a track and how to dial in like a bass sound or a lead sound in Serum, because Serum was the synth du jour at the time. And it's still a really powerful wavetable synthesizer. That's not the point. But you're right. There are a lot of people who are capitalizing on the ability to use the same tools to create like transitory sounds or transition tracks or blending tracks. And I mean, we found tracks produced by the same label that sounded like they were the same song entirely. So And that was some UKF stuff.
Yeah, definitely UKF. That's one of the ones specifically that a lot of their
They just
the
like
artists would
it,
use the same synths, but like Casper and Rusko would both use the same
yeah, it's
synths.
like they just walk into the studio after the other and don't even change anything, just hit the keys differently.
Yeah, Noisia, definitely, and like Subfocus and Calyx and TB.
You know,
So
I bet it turns out that they all got their DAWs from the same vendor. They all were loaded with the same stuff. It was like a package from the label. They're like, hey, yeah, this is what our tech guys set up for you. Just use this stuff. It'll make it
well,
easier
yeah,
later.
a lot of the labels would have one of the artists create a sample pack, and then they would use it for some albums, and then they would go sell it. So it's like there was like this sample pack to album to commercial
a pipeline.
like access pipeline that was going on from like 2014 to like 2017, and then it kind of died out just because I think it's not that electronic music ever died out so much as it became way more difficult for people to get record deals versus like between 2010 and 2017 they were fucking handing out EDM record deals like candy. It was really crazy, actually.
Man, on a completely unrelated note, Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, the original Green Ranger, has passed away.
Yeah, I've seen people reporting it for like the last 24 hours, and they hadn't really confirmed it until the last like 5 hours or so. It's really difficult to know because fucking Jimmy Fallon had a death rumor last week, which
Yeah,
is
but
like,
he dies all the time, apparently.
I mean, but it doesn't trend all the time, which is
Yeah.
where like RIP Jimmy Fallon trended last week, and it's like I saw Jason David Frank trending last night, like before I went to bed, and nobody could confirm anything. And it's like it's so difficult to know if this shit is like real or not anymore because people just do this shit for
Fun?
fucking
They think
lulz,
it's
yeah.
funny? No, man, that guy is only 49. 49. He's only 8 years older than I am. That's not funny. That's there's something's wrong.
Yeah.
49-year-old people aren't supposed to be dying. They're supposed to be like in, the prime of
That's
their
why
lives and
it's
stuff.
like at the time it was rumored that it was like suicide, so it's the details haven't come out yet because then the most confirming post was from his trainer that was like lamenting that he didn't answer the phone, so it sounds like a really fucked up situation all around.
Yeah. I mean, out of all the Power Rangers, he was the one that managed to like sustain that whole career. Everyone else kind of dropped out. The Red Ranger turned into a freaking piece of shit.
Well, Walter Jones is still like I follow Walter Jones on Instagram because it's like the thing I hate is it's like, man, why didn't this dude trend any time before he fucking died? Like all the people who are like getting him trending now, why weren't you posting about him when he was fucking alive? Or like if you're, oh, I'm so sad, why weren't you 2 weeks ago? Oh, I'm so happy Jason David Frank is still on fucking Instagram. It's like people are so conditioned to only express lament and not joy. It's like really fucking disturbing where I'm like, dude, that's probably part of the reason, I'm sure, but in the sense of like, then when people,
I mean, I gotta say, it's hard being 41 admitting that I still like Power Rangers. I'm just gonna say that I like Power Rangers. There's nothing wrong with it.
The recent movie was great.
Yeah, the recent movie was fantastic. Like
I watched it on a plane. And it's like, well, and then Jason David Frank was doing these like basically fan made versions of Power Rangers that were way darker, and it was fucking cool as shit. But they never got really any funding to like. He was trying to take it like to a bigger scale, but they never got the funding, and I don't think they got the proper rights.
Oh yeah.
So it was like they kept doing the fan made ones, and he was doing the fan signings and shit. But it's like, again, I still follow like I said, I follow Walter Jones on Instagram because it's like he's a fucking Black Ranger. Like, of course I grew up with the Black Ranger. I'm gonna fucking follow the Black Ranger on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just because I'm not just gonna like his shit or like the post about when he died. It's like, I think in the sense of it's not a responsibility, but there is this awareness of childhood stars that did not have the same career arcs, where people, if you're like fans of them as a kid and they didn't get the same sort of career arc, you gotta like go and like let them know what that shit meant to you. Otherwise they'll never know, because then it's like, if they didn't get the monetary success and the fans don't show like at least, oh, you made my life better because I got to watch Power Rangers or whatever, then they got no rewards. And that's kind of where, like, at least if you get the fan acclaim, then that's like the acknowledgement that people saw what you did. Whereas, like, I'm sure a lot of them, when they get the monetary reward, they're like, this is great, but I wish I could get the fan acclaim just so I know that it's like I didn't just sell my existence into not being recognized by history. But it's like, if he would have known all these people who were like posting about him loved him, I'm sure that would have at least changed somewhat of his perspective. But again, it's like, dude didn't fucking trend until he dies. So what is this? It's like the best thing somebody can do is fucking die in this society. And the way people like show, like fucking Takeoff from the Migos. Nobody was like, before he died, it was like, oh, the Migos aren't the same anymore because they broke up. And it was like everything up until he died was like all about how he wasn't, or his existence wasn't as good as it was before they were broken up. And then he gets killed, and then suddenly, oh God, we need to make sure we like give Takeoff his flowers and make sure people know that we love. Well, you should have been fucking doing that before. So I guess I'm like, it's like weird to me to see this shit happen over and over, where people are like repeatedly late to acknowledging that somebody like gave them like some sort of enjoyment in life, and the only time they express it is once that other person's dead, and it's like, it's too fucking late now. That don't mean shit now. You're just talking to other people who are sad that they didn't get to let him know how much he changed their life before. And that's where it's not hollow. It's everybody's feeling something. But if they were more proactive on those feelings, it wouldn't get to this point. Because God forbid, Walter Jones dies before I do. If he dies and then people are like, R.I.P. Walter Jones, well, I'm not going to feel like I missed out because I was like commenting on his page. And when he's like out doing stupid shit, just this like normal stuff, I'm like liking his pictures and reminding him that he has fans that like were there as kids who are glad to see him doing well as an adult, or when we're adults. He was an adult then, but that's where I mean, like, it's the same shit. Like, okay.
Yeah, like Austin St. John might have turned out to be a real shit show, but what the Red Ranger symbolized, that was real.
It was way different.
That was so different from what a person in real life does.
No matter what, like, Arnold hasn't done like horrible shit in the sense of like he hasn't killed anybody. There's like lines and levels, like, and nobody's perfect. So all of the people who have had Arnold Schwarzenegger affect them in a positive way tend to let him know that. And it's like, he's not the same physical specimen. So with the acknowledgement that he's probably feeling like he's not the same sort of uh motivating factor as when he was in his physical prime, the people that also then understand, yes, he's went on to accomplish more things as a governor and did all that. So you don't have to like only romanticize that part of his life to then acknowledge that he's like helped a lot of people become more than they thought they could be, regardless of whatever mistakes he's made in his personal life. And that's like, there's no amount of money that can buy that. So I'm sure in him living long enough to receive that love, it's like he's going to die in a place where he's not going to be wondering if his fans appreciated him. I can't say the same for fucking Jason David Frank because I have not seen his fucking fans outpouring the same shit that they did when he died as when he was alive. Because it's like I saw there was like multiple updated Power Rangers movies that he was trying to do, and it was like I saw him trying to like get back on the scene.
He had many variations of Power Rangers through the later series, through like the expansion of Power Rangers. He was a Red Ranger
Right,
at one
through
point.
the actual series.
Yeah, like through the actual series,
but they were trying to make like a Dark Rangers that was like for adults.
Oh
and
yeah.
That shit was cool as fuck because it was like badass fight scenes, but they would also, it was like gritty and it was dark and it was like, not to say that it needs to be dark, but it was like, it wasn't your fucking your child's Power Rangers.
Yeah,
This was like,
I think it's pretty easy to forget that he was like a legitimate martial artist. He's like an 8th degree black belt. He had his own dojo. You know,
yeah, he even fought
he was like
martial arts at one
he was
point.
like he's the real deal, and he was cool. He did a lot of good stuff. It sucks that we won't have any more stories that he gets to be a part of.
Well, and it's like this, maybe this is a point where people start to realize that it's like if they want new stories, they have a bunch of people who they have old stories with that could tell new stories instead of trying to like mine new talent for every, everything has to be new. Everything has to be 100% new. Because on the one hand, it's like, I understand nostalgia can ruin things, but it's like, yeah, a new Power Ranger story with him rooted in nostalgia, but a new story would have been fucking awesome at the large scale.
Well, there's plenty of, they've had plenty of opportunities to like pass the baton, so to speak, with the various series expansions.
I think he did. I think he was in the movie recently, as a matter of fact.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Like I'm fairly positive he was like at the very end, like the pass the baton scene, but it was like him as a civilian. I'm fairly positive.
Dude, his entire IMDb is like all Power Rangers. I wouldn't even know where to. I mean, he was in. Yeah, he's in a bunch of Power Rangers movies. There's like more Power Rangers movies here than I realized, and series.
Yeah, because one of the fucking kids was in fucking Stranger Things. Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, this is a different movie. Omniboat. A Fast Boat Fantasia. Okay. For some reason it pulled up a different cast.
Oh man, he was like in the middle of filming a movie. It's probably an animated series, an animation. Nope. It's a live action movie. Legend of the White Dragon.
Yeah, that was like they were setting up a whole mythos.
Man.
Oh damn! I didn't realize he did the voice in the game too.
Man. We're about to get a dark Power Rangers story. And that's probably not going to happen now. Wait, no, they could just put a different guy in a suit and they can salvage it if they really want to.
Yeah, he did have a role in the 2017 film. That's where I'm like, yeah, it was totally like the pass the torch scene, and I think was it the Blue Ranger that was there too. They had a couple of the old people. It wasn't just him. It might have been the Pink Ranger. I don't know. But yeah, I bet it's gonna be a spike in Power Rangers viewing now. People are gonna go, "Oh, we're gonna watch the Power Rangers movie and cry." And it's like,
I mean, if you don't cry during certain portions of the Power Ranger movies, you're just not human. And same thing goes with Terminator 2. Like, if you watch that glove dip into that molten steel and you're not fucking bawling your eyes out, there's something fucking wrong with you. That shit's sad as fuck. Like, that's like the only movie that makes us feel for fucking robots, especially killer robots from the future. And man. I think it's because there are some like fundamental storytelling mechanisms that are just like the Disney string or horn section. They can just turn on the waterworks whenever they want, and so they know it and they do it because audiences expect it at this point. It's part of the roller coaster.
Oh shit, that is okay. So there was a dude from Stranger Things, but it was a different person than I thought. The older brother of like what's her name? The redhead girl. Fuck, I don't remember.
Oh, the older teenage dude who wields the baseball bat.
Billy
becomes
Billy
cool
was
or something
in
like
the
that.
2017 Power Rangers movie. Not Finn Wolfhard, Dacker Montgomery, who's also not Zac Efron. Because whenever I saw the Power Rangers movie originally, I swore I mean I didn't look, but I thought that shit was Zac Efron.
He kind
in
of
my
looks.
head, that's been Zac Efron the whole time.
Kind of
they look exactly like to me.
It does kind of look like Zac Efron. I didn't ever think to look. I just watched it and thought, oh, this is awesome. Holy crap, Bryan Cranston is Zordon? What the hell?
Yeah.
That's all I really thought. I need to watch that movie again now that I think about it. It was that was a really good roller coaster. And it wasn't a Marvel roller coaster. It was its own roller coaster.
Well done.
It's like going from, if like the Marvel roller coaster movies are all sit down in a car, the Power Rangers roller coaster is one where you're like suspended from below the track. Completely different ride. Avatar, they just put a Oculus on your head and shake the shit out of you, though. I'm not looking forward to the new app. It looks beautiful, but the last one, oh man. And I know that in theaters it's going to be in 3D, which means I'm going to have to wait for 6 months before a non-3D version of it is available. Because I'm definitely not going to go to a theater to watch it. It does look really pretty, though. But I'm not sure how much like Fern Gully I can take at this point. I'm not sure like how they can even resurrect that story and keep it going without just ruining the property. Like as a self-contained story, it's fine. I think it's the same problem that a lot of movie franchises have, is that if they could only stop with one movie, it would be fine.
Yeah, sequels are very difficult, but I don't know if you've seen Black Panther 2 yet.
I have not.
Well, it's probably the third most successful sequel behind Godfather 2 as number 1 and Aliens as number 2. Which it sounds like high praise, but most sequels are trash.
No. There aren't many sequels that are actually.
Doctor Strange 2 is decent. It's not great.
I mean, Temple of Doom is actually superior to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it also happens chronologically happens before Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I guess Empire Strikes Back.
Empire is better than A New Hope.
Although I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Black Panther 2 is better than Empire. I know it's controversial, but I'm gonna go ahead and.
I mean, I'll
die on that hill particularly.
I don't think that George Lucas is that great of a writer. I don't think that the Star Wars trilogy is all that fantastic. It's a dressed up cowboy movie.
And I don't think this is because of the Chadwick Boseman nostalgia, in that they had a difficult job with the death of Chadwick Boseman, but they basically seamlessly blended it into the story in a way that was not offensive.
Disney, man, they've got film magic down. They know they can resurrect people and then put them away so gently that nobody is re-traumatized by it. Man, we just need Disney to solve the world's problems.
Yeah. Without spoilers, it was like I still like I said, I still think it's probably the third best sequel concerning the lift of overcoming the first film, because it's like Doctor Strange was like it was going to be impossible to beat as a sequel. And the sequel is just it's not terrible. I recently rewatched it, and it's like
it's a pretty decent horror movie.
It's best on the third time around. It's like it's like, okay, how do I say this? It's a decent horror movie, but it's a better teenage coming of age movie. Because if you recenter around America Chavez instead of Doctor Strange, it's a much better film. With the understanding that obviously it's titled Doctor Strange 2, so there's this notion of like thinking that the film is centered around him, but it's actually centered around America Chavez. Not just because it starts off with her, but she's the one that's actually going through the protagonist growth arc.
Oh yeah, she's the only one who changes. Like,
yeah, so
Strange's change is not beneficial. It takes him in the wrong direction completely.
Yeah.
He has to use dark magic. I mean, that's like Wong warned him, don't do it.
He's the supporting character to America Chavez's protagonist.
Yep.
And then in that perspective, I think it's better, but they would have had a hard time calling it like America Chavez and not Doctor Strange 2.
America Chavez in the Multiverse of Madness. Who's this chick? Why is Doctor Strange playing second fiddle?
Although, with that title, they probably would have got a lot more kids in.
Yeah.
So,
it might not be a bad idea to get a bunch of grumpy old dudes out of the movie theaters, because they clearly don't need to be in there ruining it for a bunch of kids who really just want to have fun.
I feel like if the film is literally just you just change the title to America Chavez and the Multiverse of Madness, it goes from like a 7 to an 8.5 without actually changing any of the film.
All we got to do is change the poster,
Yeah,
and re-edit the trailer.
yeah.
I'm down with that. I think that that's a good idea. I don't think the world is going to suffer if we take one movie away from the roster of Doctor Strange and give it to somebody else. If it encourages a new generation of comic book and superhero fans. Speaking of which, I watched Black Adam recently, and it gave me the impression is like this is what Gotham would be like if the League of Shadows had won and Thomas Wayne gained superpowers. Like Superman style powers. That's what I got the vibe out of. Or maybe it is the Shazam powers. But it just felt like a Gotham that had completely failed. And Batman was now ready to do anything that was necessary. Because, intergame.
Are you talking about Kahndaq?
Yeah. But it just seemed like a variation of Gotham that had been completely run into the ground and under the control of, in that case, Intergang, which I love the name of.
Mm.
I really enjoyed that movie. Although it's really difficult for me to separate The Rock from anything. So basically, I just kind of imagined this is The Rock wearing a superhero outfit being really pissed off.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the hero's journey because he was very clearly didn't quite know what was going on for the first half of the movie, and he was just kicking ass. And then he starts to get his bearings, and next thing you know, he's really kicking ass, and it was awesome. I thought for the first time, finally we get to see Hawkman kicking some ass too, because Hawkman's awesome also, and that means we're going to get more Thanagaran technology. Yes, because like that whole like interstellar war that the Thanagarans are going through is like, I think that's the thing that's like on par with all the deep space, like the Guardians of the Galaxy type stuff in the Marvel universe. It's like it's like it touches into that stuff better than Green Lantern, which I'm really curious to see how they try to salvage that, because Ryan Reynolds pretty much screwed that one up. Although I'm not entirely sure if it's his fault.
Well, have you watched it recently?
The Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern?
Yeah.
It's okay. It's a good installment, but it's not a good Green Lantern story.
It's fine up until the third act, and that's when the third act goes off the rail, where it's like that's when it's like 100% not a Green Lantern story.
Yeah,
and it ends up in this place where you're like, what are we watching? But up until the third act, it's like it's actually a decent film.
Yeah,
and it's because of the like Green Lantern Sinestro dynamic, and then they just abandon that shit completely.
You had to go for the big nothing or whatever, the big bad.
So
yeah, that was the problem. It all fell apart at the end, and it was just a bad story.
Yeah,
the CGI was great, like because they did all the things, the big hand and the spring and the fly swatter stuff and the hammer, all that stuff. That was fantastic, but they lost the script at some point, or the showrunners changed hands, and I just it's like I always liked.
I really wanted to like it as what it is, but it's clearly flawed in the third act, and that's where I'm like, the first and second act are not. They're fine. Third act is if you just cut it, it would be a better film without a conclusion.
Just leave it open-ended. It'd be a better story.
You could end it there, because then there's still the suspense of the Sinestro connection, and that was a better place, I think.
Well, that leaves it open for a sequel, and if they conclude it with destroying the Sinestro's power and the yellow rings, like then they don't have to worry about it afterwards. Something. I think that there were a lot of really strange decisions made with Green Lantern, and that's been the reason that they have been unable to, inject him into the DC expanded universe. Also, Hal Jordan wasn't the funny Lantern. He was a serious Lantern, and the funny Lantern came later, and he was a comic book artist, and that would have been the one that they should have told the story about with Ryan Reynolds. That would have made more sense, because then he could have cracked all the jokes he wanted to, and it would have been appropriate. But Hal Jordan was a serious dude. He's a test pilot. I mean, I can't imagine Maverick trying to tell jokes. He's such a wooden character. I don't know.
Well, and this is where I'm interested to see what they're going to, well, if they, with James Gunn there, I know they're definitely going to do a Jon Stewart now. It's just a matter of like which Jon Stewart version they go with.
Well, yeah, the DC has been pushing Jon Stewart Lantern pretty consistently for the last decade, it seems. So I think he's the current Lantern that everyone expects. Nobody even knows about the comic book artist who became the Lantern. It jumps from Hal Jordan to Stewart.
Well, and they did a great Jessica Cruz on Stargirl.
Yeah.
Which got canceled, unfortunately. That was like setting up to be a promising Lantern storyline. I always thought of Jessica Cruz as like one of the more powerful ones.
Well, she had her character came about during a time when they were, I think the writers had a little bit more imagination. They were being a little bit more creative with the powers of the ring. Because like early Lantern stuff, it was big fists and hammers and brick walls and glowing nets. And as it progresses, then it becomes more fun. But with Jon Stewart, it comes back because he's military. His solutions are a little bit more practical. But I think that's part of the fun, is that it's a fantasy world and these things can change. They don't have to be, all of our Green Lanterns don't have to be these ex-military dudes who fit perfectly into the mold of the Corps, or the Lantern Corps. It's more interesting when it's somebody who doesn't fit, like an oddball who happens to make use of the power in ways that no one else has thought of before. And then it becomes interesting. That's kind of why that was one of the things that I lost interest with Spider-Man, is that when I was younger, it was great. But as I got older, Spider-Man doesn't really change.
And it's like the stories they tell where he does change get so dark, where it's like, it's not, you don't want to see that Spider-Man story necessarily. So then, like, whenever he gets dark after May died, or when Gwen died, it's like shit gets real dark. Those are not fun Spider-Man stories. Which is like, Spider-Man is ironically a teenager coming of age story. So when it moves outside of that realm, it just gets, it's hard, I think, for that character to, I mean, they've done a ton with it, but for people who grow up on it, I think it's hard to accept it outside of that paradigm, because it's like you're dealing with something that has a whole. Okay, this is also another issue. Is like Spider-Man is a terrible person. Peter Parker is a fucking terrible person.
Oh, he's
His
flawed as hell.
No. He's not just flawed. He's literally a terrible person. Like I'm asserting, because if you go back and look at it, the only reason Ben died is because he let the fucking guy get by him, because he's like, oh, it's not my job to fucking stop criminals. You gonna pay me? Then I'll stop him. So it's like this person who was like willing to just let criminals get away with some shit if there was no monetary incentive. That's a terrible, terrible human being. So for him to immediately feel the repercussion and then basically start a vigilante career because of guilt, but then in the process start making money by taking pictures of himself, he's still a terrible person. He just is fighting crime now. So there's this whole element of like when you get older and look at Spider-Man, it's like, so you're kind of sociopathic. You're very
he pays the bills by beating people up.
Yeah, and trying to glamorize himself. In the process, J. Jonah Jameson actually right. Spider-Man is a fucking terror. He's a danger to the community. When it really comes down to
Peter Parker figured out how to monetize himself way before anyone else.
Well, but here's the thing. Superman didn't do it.
That's true. He didn't, because he had some fucking scruples.
Lois. He had enough integrity to, if there was going to be a story about Superman, Lois fucking did it. Because that's conflict of interest, writing stories about yourself. Spider-Man was propagandist. So when you really like break it down, it is like it's really hard to like look at that shit as an adult and not get too critical and then be like, I'm not really sure Peter Parker's a good guy. His whole thing is mainly because his actions came back to bite him immediately.
Well, a significant portion of his behavior is to attract the attention of Mary Jane.
Yeah.
And while simultaneously prevent her from knowing who he is. There's obviously something up when this one chick is constantly being saved by Spider-Man. Nobody seems to see that there's like this glowing spotlight on this chick, always being saved by Spider-Man.
And when he got the black costume, it was even worse.
Yeah, it was.
He was like a straight up douchebag then.
Yeah, well, he was running around with the Shadow Cat, and she was trying to seduce him all the time, and they tried to play it off like they didn't have a thing, but they totally had a thing. He's totally like flirting with Disaster, running around with another woman in a scantily clad catsuit, I might add. like seriously, that was the weirdest portion of Spider-Man that I remember reading. It's like, wait, where's Mary? Oh, Mary Jane's back at home waiting for him while he's running around with this chick he's making out with on rooftops. Who, I might add, was a very adept martial artist. Like, she could totally kick some ass. I mean, I understand why it happened, but no, you're right. Spider-Man's terrible. He's a horrible example. Although, to be fair, I don't think Tobey Maguire's ever going to be like, adult Spider-Man again. So I don't think they're going to have that opportunity to tell that
Doctor
story.
Strange.
Yeah.
I mean, they did. Because like in it's, they don't show it, but they allude to, I think Spider-Man killed somebody that like after, May died and after Harry died, because he was talking about he went through a really dark time, and he was like beating up a criminal, and that criminal didn't stop or something. Like it sounded like he beat somebody to death. because he was fucking
He was out of
unable
control.
to stop himself. Yeah.
You know, that's tough because Spider-Man's a powerful dude. Like in the comics, he's got like a pretty powerful punch or a powerful kick. He's no slouch in the fisticuffs. So imagining Spider-Man not relenting and just keep on going is actually real scary. He took out the X-Men in their own mansion. So, you know, he's not he's a force to be reckoned with. Like adult Spider-Man is probably like is probably capable of handling like entire Avengers levels calamity.
When thinking about it, the basically the entire premise of Doctor Strange 2 is that the villains who got pulled into that multiverse were on the edge of being killed by Spider-Man. So like in those films where they ended in like, you know, it's like
None of those things happened. Tobey Maguire didn't kill Dr. Octavius. He didn't kill Osborn.
After, but the Peter Parker that we saw did.
Yeah.
And that's where he went on a darker path because he had started killing even the villains that he was facing, which is where it's like, I think there's a difference between that Peter Parker and Andrew Garfield's even.
Yeah. Well, Andrew Garfield was trying to save Jamie Foxx the whole time. It was his friend. Right. They were homies. Like, he didn't want to hurt him. They did a good job with his Spider-Man. It was a little hokey, but I didn't. I'm not gonna. They were better than the Tobey Maguire Venom story that we got, which was total crap.
Yeah, that was trash.
Like, there was never going to be a way for that story universe to create Spider-Woman the way that the Venom story universe has created. It created room for Spider-Woman.
But there's, you know, knowing that there's one iteration in which it doesn't really happen and then another one where it does. Or I guess there's multiple iterations at this point.
Yeah.
But what's it called? Into the Spider-Verse seems to have given the live actions an in that assuming they might bring back Andrew Garfield again.
Yeah.
He might be able to work with another Gwen from a different universe, which would be like, I think, a good on-screen resolution that they never got to have.
I think Spider-Woman can exist in She-Hulk universe.
Oh, most definitely.
Like 100%. Like, they could totally hang out on like after hours and then go kick some ass without even putting their costumes on, and it would make sense. Yeah, that's it. That's how we get Spider-Woman. Fucking the She-Hulk story universe.
I'm not sure if they'll break the fourth wall again, but it totally makes sense for She-Hulk to travel the multiverse.
Oh yeah,
at least in some level.
Well, they've laid the foundation for West Coast Avengers, and
there's also apparently Across the Spider-Verse coming in 2023.
Oh, that could actually be really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
You know, there are quite a few Spider-Man stories where he goes like, you know, Fantastic Four levels of technology and interdimensional travel type stuff, and that stuff's really fantastic. Obviously, it's Fantastic Four universe, but putting Spider-Man in those situations was always cool because it took him away from all of the crap that you know we just complained about. It's the whole what do we do? What does Spider-Man do when he's facing something completely foreign and unrecognizable? He Spider-Man's his way out of it.
And I think this is one of the things that the MCU and by proxy, I guess now Sony is really doing a really good job of resetting the scales. And like at the end of No Way Home, he's like back to the street level.
Yeah.
He's gone off planet. He's gone to space. Fucking been snapped. He's died.
He's been
come back to
unsnapped.
life. Yeah. But now he's back to like making his own uniform, back to street level. And that's like a really difficult thing to have pulled off, actually. Which I think MCU.
I really liked it, the Night Monkey storyline.
Yeah, that shit was cool.
That was great.
It did it well. But they've done a really good job with story arcs.
Yeah.
And it's like making you care about the worlds, but also the individuals, even down to like the friends and shit. It's like the dynamic between MJ and what is it? It's not. Is it Jacob? I forget the guy's name.
I don't remember.
Yeah, whatever. But they still make a good dynamic, and it's like even though,
but they have to have something to do.
Yeah, it's like that's actually really difficult to pull off, to have everybody at every level.
You know, they kind of remind me of R2 and C-3PO.
Exactly. It's really difficult to get the side characters as sympathetic as the main. But they seem to have done a good job about it.
How are they going to get Venom and Spider-Man to get into a fight, though? Because the Tom Brady Venom he's very, he's a challenged character. He's got a lot of he's all internal conflict. It'd be really difficult for me to, at this point, to accept his character becoming the bad guy, Eddie Brock, that Spider-Man faced off in the comics. Because they took the version of Eddie Brock that was troubled and just wanted to be a part of his community and take care of the people in his community that he trusted and cared about.
But I could also see if somehow the Tom Holland Spider-Man wrongs him on accident, he could definitely get vengeful. I can totally see that.
I can see that too, actually, now that you mention when you frame it like that.
I could also see the Tom Holland Spider-Man fucking up something on accident completely to then make him the target of a righteous vengeance Venom.
See, that's a Venom storyline that's worth telling.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And that's where I feel like they've set it up so we're just sympathetic enough with Venom that we could see like, oh yeah, Peter really fucked him over here. So I can see why he needs to show Peter like, don't do this again.
You know, I think if that happens, we're gonna get he's gonna have to channel some of his Bane-ness.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a good story, I think. Venom,
Tom
Hardy losing something. Tom Hardy Venom losing something at the hands of Spider-Man's just buffoonery, but he doesn't even realize that he's done something wrong.
Oh, you know what? What if they take Gwen Stacy, take her death, have Spider-Man attempt to save Venom's girlfriend, fail, drop her, break her neck, and that's where if Spider-Man's trying to save Venom's girlfriend or Eddie Brock's girlfriend technically and fails, that's the type of shit.
Or Spider-Man prevents Eddie Brock Venom from saving her.
Or yeah, either one, because he's trying, because they're fighting or something. And yeah, that's the type of shit where
he stops him.
I could totally see a righteous Eddie coming after
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in
Hey, Sony Disney guys, you can have that one.
With
have it. Take it.
It's yours. Just do it.
RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was Exceptional Radio.